So we're getting into the top 20 now. This guy, heavyweight fighter, 50 wins, 6 losses, 2 no contests. I don't want to give any facts about him because you'll get this immediately.
Why is he on this list?
I was gonna say Tyson. It's Tyson.
Why is he on this
Excuse
list?
me?
Impact, man.
Yeah.
Number 20.
Yeah, no, but he should be 25. He really shouldn't be top 20. Just
I think with Mike, I had him, I believe, at 24. I think,
I had him 25.
and I think it's like Shug's saying, he didn't have a lot of big time wins, right? Like the division wasn't great when he came up, but as Deshaun was saying, the impact that Mike Tyson had on boxing, you cannot deny. Like he was the biggest thing on the planet.
He was the biggest draw on earth.
In late 80s, early 90s. Like you couldn't get away from Mike Tyson. And when even if you're not Jesus Christ. You're talking about you had a Ben Roethlisberger joke? That's what you had?
No, I'm not talking. We're not talking Ben. Come on, stop bringing this to bro.
But even when you're not talking about fighting elite competition, right? Because not a lot of the guys were great fighters that he went against, but he did to them what you should do to guys who are not on your level.
Mm-hmm.
He
lot
dispatched
of great
them
fighters don't always do
with the quickness.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean,
Mike Tyson helped turn boxing into a culture in the sense that everybody, like I said earlier, going over to somebody's house, coming to watch the fight, like that's what Mike Tyson was known for doing. Like Mike Tyson was the biggest draw. Like you said, there's 3 Mikes: Jordan, Jackson, and Tyson. Don't ever forget the third one because Mike Tyson was swinging like death in both hands. I put him in my top 5 just because of sheer dominance in the sense that I look at when I'm comparing Roy Jones to Allen Iverson, I compare Mike Tyson to Shaq in the sense that pure dominance at his peak is there's a chance he might have decapitated anybody you put in front of him just because.
I mean,
right?
I agree.
Xander didn't leave that by whole.
Look, I agree with you, Deshaun, but then you got to go back to when he was fighting. He did not. When he fought people that were on his level, he just didn't beat them. And he was still in his prime when he fought Evander, and Evander whooped him up. Lennox Lewis destroyed him.
He was physically in his prime.
He wasn't in his prime when he fought Lennox, though.
Not when he fought Lennox, but when he fought Evander, he was in his prime, and Evander just.
He was physically in his prime. I don't think mentally he was necessarily.
Yeah, I think I think it's a tough thing to say there because he had just come out of prison. He had been laid off for a long time.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think that Holyfield probably would have beat him regardless. But it was there were different circumstances there.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because we can only go off of what they actually did in the ring. So I feel shook on that, right?
Yeah,
and you see what he could have been, and you saw some of what he was, and the impact that he had on the sport. But the reality is, he did lose to Holyfield twice. He did get knocked out by Lance Lewis. He lost to Buster Douglas, right? And that happened.
We should not have lost to.
That's the bigger one. And I mean, okay, let's be all the way fair, right? Like he didn't really lose. He won the fight, but they kind of, he got a little screwed in that one. But he went down as the loss. It shouldn't have been that close, regardless.
I think when you're on the butt end of arguably the biggest upset in sports history, that I guess that does hurt you, and I can kind of see that.
But he did bounce back from that. But the problem is we all know he was just mismanaged, right? He was a force of nature. We know that Don King didn't manage him right, and then he just had the wrong people in his corner. They didn't train him well. He got into trouble. You just saw just his career being derailed by the people around him, but was still able to make an impact in the sport. What he is for me? He's the Fab Five of boxing, right? He's a Fab Five of boxing. When the Fab Five got together in college basketball, they changed the way you watched college basketball and enjoyed it. And that was Mike Tyson for me for boxing. You know.
So you're saying when he lost to Buster Douglas, that was Chris Webber in the NCAA?
Yes.
In the tournament travel. That is a great. That's great comparison right there, Jose. That is top notch. That's why you listen to Lunch Break Hot Take. That was amazing right there. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, Deshaun. I think, and I grew up with Tyson. My best friend and me, all we used to do on the weekends was there was a Tyson fight. He had a legal cable. We go to his house and we watch it and just.
I thought he was going to say Tyson's punch out. He's like, no, we stole cable.
He had the box. Yeah.
But Tyson was a phenomenon. Was a phenomenon in boxing. That's why he deserved to be on the list. I joked when I said he shouldn't be on the list. You know, he absolutely should be on the list for what he did for boxing. As far as boxing in the ring, he was dominant at one point, but when he did fight somebody on his level, you could tell there was something wrong. I feel bad because Customato really had Customato be able to stay alive. I think that would have saved Mike, and he wouldn't have had those people around him. And we might be talking a different story where this guy never lost a fight because he was a killer. We all saw that in his fights where realistically he was an amazing fighter, and the way Customato showed him how to box was an unrealistic style that just nobody had an answer for.
Yes.
And I think if Customato stayed alive, he could have got Mike past Lennox, past Holyfield, and just managed him correctly. And I don't think we see him. We see him in a different light. But unfortunately, Customato died. Don King took over all these. I mean, you go back and watch that fight with Buster Douglas. They have a rubber glove with
Tony
water
brought that up.
Tony, Tony.
They didn't even have the stool for him ready when he came to the corner. Like it's
nothing.
It was that fight actually because I was young when that happened. But when I saw the fight, I noticed how the corner wasn't really telling them anything. They're like, "Oh yeah, you got it." Because
he wasn't supposed to lose that fight.
It was that fight.
They thought they were going to be there for a minute and a half, and
that's what they thought. But it was that fight that made me start paying attention to what the corner tells the fighters, right? And I talk to B all the time. I'm like, I'm always listening to what the corner tells the fighter because sometimes, even today, like you listen to these fights and listen to what the corners are telling the fighters. Yeah. Sometimes it's just BS. You're just like, yo, you ain't telling me nothing.
That's a great point, because I be listening to people like when they make the comparison when they're talking about like team sports. Oh, this isn't boxing. You're not out there by yourself. I'm like, that's true to an extent, but like who you have in your corner and as a boxer is absolutely critical. It's it absolutely matters.
It is.
Like you can have all the talent, work ethic, and heart and ability in the world, but if your corner is ass water, then that's what it is.
Yeah,
right?
You're at a major disadvantage.
And I want to point out what Ferris is saying. To both of Ferris's points, he saved heavyweight boxing, and Tyson won the fight during the walkouts. He was in the top 15 for me. Actually, he was at 15 on my list, and that was those two reasons played a huge part into why he was that high on my list. Also. I mean, let's just be real. Like Mike is probably the second most recognizable boxer outside of Ali. Ali.
Like who hasn't seen that clip of him just following the dude with his eyes in the stare down right before the fight? You know,
and
that scares me.
Yes, I would be like you. You already took my soul right there if I'm standing across from you. I don't know if you remember that boxer I guess this was like 3 years ago where a boxer went to the ring and then when he went back to the corner, he got out and walked out.
He's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, that's what it would be for me. But there is a sense that Mike, and it started to come on later on in as people got older and realized or learned more about boxing, that Mike was, some would call Mike overrated, right? And it was due to his record, right? You know what I mean? And who he fought and who he lost to and et cetera. But you cannot deny his impact on the sport and being a box office he was just straight box office. And so he got to be here.
Yeah, 100% agree with Mike.
All right, so moving on to number 19. This is a guy who I checked this time. I actually didn't have on my list, but you know, one of my favorite fighters growing up as well. So I'll say he was one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time. Who y'all got?
Sweet Pea.
Pernell Whitaker.
Is it Floyd? Yeah,
Sweet
yeah,
Pea.
Yes.
Pernell Whitaker.
Yes.
40 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, 1 no contest. He had the longest unified title reign, and he held all the belts. This was just in terms of the number of defenses. He had 6 defenses as the unified champion, and was the champion in 4 different weight divisions. Obviously, you know, if you don't know, he passed away recently, so you know, rest in peace to Pernell. But you know, he had a lot of big time fights. You know, when we were coming up.
We add to the end of his record at least 2 robberies.
Yes, from Oscar for sure.
Yeah,
that was awful. But yeah, no, one of the best fighters out there at the time, and wasn't just a defensive fighter, right? He had the offense to go along with it when he needed it.
Yeah.
I'd put him on my list in large part because just how I said certain guys, like boxing doesn't look the same. We might not have a Floyd Mayweather if, you know, there isn't a Pernell Whitaker first. And I know Floyd, you know, his father and uncle were boxers, but you can see a lot of that style, you know, translate over. And then you can also hear, like, when he talks about his favorite boxers of all time, like he always mentions Pernell Whitaker. So that encouraged me to go back and watch and do more research, and I had him on my list for sure.
Yeah, I agree
100%.
because even with Floyd didn't become that defensive style boxer until like the second half of his career.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, he always had. I mean, he had that style early on, but he was more
There's
of
Money
I'm
Mayweather
looking at,
and Pretty Boy Floyd. There's
Pretty Boy
always
Floyd,
2
yeah.
different Mayweathers.
Yes. The Pretty Boy Floyd was looking to knock you out. He was looking to make a name for himself.
Mhm.
Still very skilled, but he was more going after it. The later, you know, the Money Mayweather was more that Sweet Pea type of I'm a defensive fighter, you know, and I'm gonna make you miss and, you know, hit and not get hit type of fighter.
Yeah.
But yes, Sweet Pea I think definitely kind of paved the way for that.
This is low for me. This is low. Sweet Pea was in my top 10.
I had him at
Wow.
number 10.
Okay.
I had Sweet Pea at 9, and I part of the reason I think Sweet Pea is one of the most, if not the most underrated fighter in history. I think he was that guy. I think, like you guys are saying, I think he was Floyd before the Floyd. You know what I mean? And he might not have been. Not to say he was as skilled as Floyd, right? But I think he had that type of talent to run through boxing like we watched Floyd do. The fact that 2 of the robberies that he had on his record, it was Oscar and what was the other fight that was questionable?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it was another big fight. To
Was
me,
it Trinidad?
Chavez. No,
It wasn't
Trinidad.
Trinidad.
He lost to Trinidad.
Yeah, he lost
Okay.
to Trinidad.
I thought that was a robbery.
I can't remember what the
Was it Chavez?
I want to say it was Chavez.
Chavez,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Like that's 2 big fights, 2 big names that if you add those as W's to him, you know, that puts him in amongst the great.
It was Ramirez. I think you're talking about. Yeah, Ramirez. He lost by split decision.
It was
Jose
another.
Luis Ramirez.
We'll
That's
check
what
on
you're talking
the Chavez one too. I think the Chavez one was a controversial.
Well, it was a draw.
Yeah,
No.
right, right.
Are you okay? No. The one that you're talking about that was robbery was Julio.
Yeah,
And
it
Oscar
was
versus Julio.
it was
Those
it was
both of
Chavez and Oscar. So those are big names. If you add those as wins, man, you know that puts him in a different stratosphere.
That's true. That's
so
true.
And I just want to say
he made top 10 for me.
I just want to say to Ferris, I didn't have him on my list just because I ran out of spots on the list, man. Like, there's a
Yeah,
lot
bro.
of, there's a lot of
25
great fighters, man.
spots is
There's
not a
great
lot of
fighters.
names.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
this guy, you know, maybe I could have replaced this guy with Pernell, but this guy for me, I had him fairly high up on the list, and it's just because of sheer workload. All right, this man. Let me go ahead and read his record before I put him up here. 229 wins, 11 losses, and 1 draw. Now, I mean, listen, we talk about the number of fights that those guys had, but they usually come with a lot of losses too. Especially when they get later on in the career. My man had 229 wins to 11 losses. That in and of itself
is Willie Pep?
Unbelievably impressive. And it is Willie Pep. I'm not even going to attempt to say his real name because that's not his real name. He was a 2-time featherweight champion. And if you watch him fight, he didn't fight the same way that a lot of fighters fought in that time. He was very quick, very elusive. He wasn't kind of that brawler. He was the dance around and make you look foolish, missing, swinging and missing type. He did also, I do have to mention, he was also accused of throwing a fight later in his career to Lulu Perez. After he went down with a delayed reaction to a punch. Now, I mean, we've all seen delayed reactions. It happens. I mean, I haven't seen the video, so I don't know.
You fight 200 times, like you're not making good money. He absolutely threw. He probably threw all 11 of those launches.
He ended up
said, "I need money."
Like, put a picture back up. Put a picture back up. Look how thin that glove is. That's not a glove. That's an oven mitt.
So that's what I was talking about, Zay, when we were talking on the other day, and I was like, man, these guys fought with like the old like sacks that you would get peanuts in and shit from the store. Like that's a knapsack on your hand. That's not a glove.
Yeah, you might. You ought to knock out 200
no
people.
respect. No respect.
I mean, I get where Ferris is coming from.
Yeah.
And I had Willie Pep high on my list, but
I think he was like 14.
When you go back and look at, like you said, 200 fights, that's a lot. And you're like
229 and 11, fam.
And that's just the wins, 229.
Yeah. So, but when you go back, but then again, like Deshaun said earlier, these were people they were bringing off the streets to fight. So you have to weigh it out. And be like, you know what?
But I feel like that 229 kind of weighs. If you knock out 200,
he didn't knock out that many people.
Let's say you go out on the street, right? Let's say you have a pissed off day and you go out and beat up 229 people. Yeah, you're one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen.
But I mean that's a lot of fights, right? But it's not the same as, hey, I fought 229 people that had a training camp. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not the same thing, which is
it's
why
a little different.
It's a little different, but still 229 people.
He had 65 knockouts in those 229 wins.
Like, his hands probably turned to dust at some point because he didn't have no protection. So that's your bones connecting to 229 skulls. Like,
in a way, it's more impressive because, like you guys pointed out, they were fighting longer fights back then.
Yeah,
he was going the distance quite a bit.
You know what his impact was on boxing?
You're exhausted.
You know what his impact was? It was, hey man, like, we need some thicker gloves to protect their hands. Like, look at my man Willie's knuckles. Like, they don't show pictures of him
they
without
weren't even knuckles anymore. They were
maybe let's take it down to 12 rounds.
Remember that episode of SpongeBob when he tried to get into the salty splatoon and I forgot what he did and he crushed his hand?
Like, we're not all around 40.
Bro, everybody.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Mike was watching SpongeBob this morning with his son. So, I mean,
All right. Yeah. So next up at number 17. I know this is a guy that we all know and have seen and know a lot about. The Executioner, Bernard Hopkins. Finished his career 55 wins, 8 losses, 2 draws, 2 no contests. He was the first male fighter to hold the belts from all 4 major sanctioning bodies simultaneously. Oldest boxer in history to win a world title. He beat George Foreman's record. He was 46 years old. And this guy, he didn't pick up boxing until he went to prison. He discovered boxing, and he ended up serving about 5 years of an 18-year sentence. He got out, went into boxing, and became one of the greatest ever.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Why is this funny?
Ferris's comment.
Ferris said, yeah, Puerto Rico's favorite man. I
would never forget that. I'll never forget that press conference.
So I was crushed. I was crushed when he beat Tito. I was crushed.
Yeah.
Yo.
Oh my god. That press conference.
You're gonna be there soon, Ferris. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Then this ain't gonna be funny no more.
Yeah. Like
you threw that bag of rice and beans at him. Told him that was his last meal. Yo, I was like, damn.
I was watching Bernard Hopkins
disrespectful
last night when I was like putting together my list, and bro, dude was a killer at
they called him an executioner for a reason.
Like, bro, to be 46 and be a champion, like in boxing, we're talking about how great Tom Brady was for being a Super Bowl champion as a quarterback, and rightfully so. But to go out there and actually beat people up and get beat up for a living.
Yeah.
At 46, come on, bro. You got to have him on the list.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. And his defense, you can put him right up there with Sweet Pea, man. Like, he had great defense.
His opponents just couldn't figure out, which is why, and obviously he had the conditioning. He took care of himself really well. And that's why he had that longevity.
So when you have that prison conditioning, you can go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, that's straight iron you working out with over there, man.
Yeah, in prison you learn how to fight for your life. So
but so question for you guys. Him versus Canelo in their primes.
Oh, hey, we saw that. We saw that. We saw that with Felix Trinidad versus him. He would I think
that wasn't Felix's prime though.
I'm taking B-Hop.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was Felix's prime.
Felix only fought a couple more times after that.
Yeah, Felix only.
But you know what though? But I'm with you. Like I even in the prime, he probably still beats Felix, right? Like Felix got too close to the sun, right? He moved up too heavy, right? That was middleweight, right? And I thought he was going to take him because he knocked out William Joppy before that, but yeah, I just think he was just a much bigger fighter, just too big for Felix, and like you said, he has that style that Felix was not going to be able to figure out.
And you could make that argument about Canelo for Bernard, that he might just be too big for him.
Yeah, I actually, Brodny, I have to kind of agree with you now.
But
Canelo is big, so he's bigger than Felix. So maybe he could have dealt with him.
But he was a lot bigger than Floyd too.
B-Hop's defense, yo, like Canelo ain't fight nobody like that. I mean, he fought Mayweather.
Exactly, and that was once again.
But again, that was well before Canelo's prime.
Yeah,
fair enough.
He didn't.
But
He
we're
didn't have
also
any business
talking
being
about
in
B-Hop's
Floyd
prime.
But he didn't have any business being in the ring with Floyd.
And that was way after Floyd's prime too. We also got to take that into account.
Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah.
But, Floyd's one of those guys where if you have the chance to fight him, you go and fight him. Regardless.
You take it,
whether you're ready or not.
Yeah,
he is the biggest. He's the biggest meal ticket in boxing.
Yeah,
and you're gonna go get that check regardless. And he did. He took the loss. He didn't make any excuses. He's like, yeah, man, he was too good for me. And then he went along and he developed, and now he's the number one guy, right?
Yeah.
And again, you're flirting with moving up to cruiserweight and fighting their champion. Like, he's way bigger than what Tito was. He's way bigger than Hopkins. So I think it would be a difficult fight for Bernard. I think that Canelo could. I'm not saying this would happen for sure, but I think he could break him down over 12 rounds and get that.
But do you think that Canelo being bigger would be tempted to be the aggressor in that situation?
I think he would.
That's exactly what B-Hop would kind of want as a defensive fighter, right?
Yeah, but I think that if you look at Canelo the way he fights right now, and granted, listen, these guys are not Bernard Hopkins, right?
Damn right.
They're not the threat that Bernard Hopkins is, but he walks guys down. He does work to the body, and he just breaks them down over time. And I think that would kind of be what he tried to do with Bernard. I think he would. I think he could do it. I'm not saying for sure that I would pick him in that fight. I think it'd be a great fight.
Draw him into a trap, if anything.
Jose, was Felix a big body puncher? Do you remember?
I mean,
I remember he doesn't remember.
He was well rounded, but like his thing was he had like the meanest left hook in the game, right? That was the thing that put you down. And I remember because when he knocked out Joppy before he fought Hopkins, and Joppy was like, yeah, everybody talks about how strong he is with that hook. I just didn't believe it, like, like he had that power. But no, like it wasn't like that wasn't like his bread and butter, like his body shot. But he could put you down with a body shot.
And so that's where I now kind of see where Brodny's coming from, because Canelo, it's not his bread and butter, but he's good to the body.
Yeah.
And he goes to the body consistently, whereas Felix, and maybe that would get to Hopkins going to the body.
But so did Hopkins. Hopkins knocked out.
But Hopkins did too. So
De La Hoya that way.
Damn. Now I want to see this fight.
It would have been. I think it would have been a good fight. It would have been a good.
Oh, it would have been a great fight. Would have been a great fight.
Fantastic fight.
Then he could have pissed off the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans. He would have been, you know.
And on that note,
oh wait, hold on. Before you go to the next one, Ferris wants to know what did Hopkins do to get 18 years. I looked it up. He had 9 different felony charges, right. But I think the one that got him that 5 years was armed robbery.
Well, the 18, but he only did 5.
Yes.
So moving on to number 16, we brought this guy up earlier. 72 wins, 11 losses, 11 draws, 3 no contests. The first black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, held the title for 7 years. He won the fight of the century versus the great white hope Jim Jeffries, who they brought out of retirement to steal the belt back from the big mean black guy. Didn't really go well for Jim. His corner was begging. He begged Jack Johnson to stop hitting him.
He said, "Please don't hit my friend." He said, "Please don't hit my friend again."
Yeah. He jumped in the ring and was trying to protect him with his body. And you know, a lot of people say that he was kind of a precursor to Ali, where he was really flashy, you know, and he talked a lot of trash, and he didn't care what people thought about him, and you know, in a much more dangerous time for black fighters. I did want to mention, though, like we talked about his impact in being the first black heavyweight. I think we also have to mention that once he got the belt, he refused to fight any black fighters for the first five years or so of his title reign. And then when he did finally fight a black fighter, it wasn't the colored champion. It wasn't somebody who had been a contender for that belt. It was kind of a lower tier fighter, and people were not happy about it.
Hey, to that point about jumping his corner, jumping and please don't hit my friend. Like, I love my friends to death. Yeah. Actually, not to death, but
he's the first black heavyweight champion.
Between you and a world heavyweight champion that's currently beating the snot out of you already, I'm gonna jump in there with more than just my rib cage to protect you, fam.
But back then, how long were they used to go like a lot of rounds.
There weren't limits.
There weren't limits.
Yeah, you're going until somebody drops.
Yeah. So respect to him, because he just was beaten.
Yeah, when he eventually lost the belt, he got knocked out in the 26th round. And what they said was he was actually dominating the fight.
Rounds?
Yeah, he was actually dominating the fight, but you know, he was old and he just eventually got tired, and then, you know, dude started hitting him with some body blows and eventually put him away in the 26th.
Yeah, 26 rounds.
Yeah.
But also, you know, just to lead up to that fight with Jeffries, right? Because Jeffries came out of retirement, and you know, they're chronicling his training, and he got into great shape
on the radio.
Yeah. Like they have like radio episodes, and everybody you gather around and listen to this.
How
great white
boring
hope.
was it to be alive in the early 1900s?
And there's footage you can go on YouTube and watch the fight. Like they take the fight because, you know, they knew Jeffries was gonna do it, right? And then when he got beat to a bloody pulp, well, one, there was a riot, right? There were riots that ensued after that fight, and then the Senate, the local Senate, they passed something to block the footage from being sold out of state.
Cruiserweight is 190.
Yeah.
So,
but so you had Jack Johnson also passing laws as well. So
yeah,
and that's what I'm saying. Some of these boxers, the impact on boxing is bigger than, you know,
and their record shows.
And that's why
he still had a good. Yeah, but he still
had a great record.
You said Brodny. You said he had 72 wins.
72 wins, 11 losses, 11 draws, and
that's a good record.
Right, that went 26 rounds. Yeah. Like, if you fight someone on the street for 26 seconds, you're exhausted.
And he said, "Look, I'm not fighting another black fighter." You know, so he was the first boxer that stayed on code.